Welcome to our second Flashbacks movie, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. This was In the Name of the Father from 1993. This biopic examines the Irish Jerry Conlon, who was wrongfully sentenced to a life in prison for an IRA terrorist attack that killed 4 people.
True that. How do you feel about this movie, Johnny?
Having seen half of it to this point, this is we talked about this in the previous segment. This movie seems to attach to me on a much more emotional level and visceral level. It's an interesting juxtaposition from his life as, on the streets to being suddenly interrogated by the British intelligence for a crime he didn't commit, which was a bombing in London. I believe they were in London, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And just the interrogation that he goes through, really, I think a lot of people today can connect with that just because of things that have gone on that we've heard about at Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib, all the things that are going on in these wars that we've been fighting for the last few years. So it feels a little bit more true.
Indeed. I was saying before we started that I feel like anybody who's in favor of indefinite detention and in favor of enhanced interrogation should have to watch something like this and realize that this is how these things go. That you hear stories all the time. This stuff still happens all the time. They pull someone in and they work them until they confess to what they want them to confess to. It doesn't matter whether they're actually guilty or not. And even after they may be found not guilty, that information doesn't necessarily get out to the people. So it's kind of a sad story. I just felt sad the whole time I was watching this because it's so easily unavoidable. And again, as we mentioned in the last movie, the conflict between the English and the IRA, obviously they want to be independent from England and everything. So you can kind of appreciate that. But at the same time, when you boil everything down, they are countrymen and they're fighting over something that only some of them care about. And there's all these people that are caught up in the carnage. Sad.
A lot of innocent bystanders.
But you're right. Those scenes are worth pointing out and picking out because I think they're the most terrifying part of this movie.
It is frightening.
And they're very visceral. They're very emotionally laden.
Mm-hmm.
They're troubling. They're stirring. You get involved in them, and it really takes over. I think that's where you get latched into this movie, and you're stuck with it for the rest of the time. It's a long movie, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, and I feel like both sides do the police who interrogate and Daniel Day-Lewis and the other 3 that get brought in. You do see the emotions run high on both sides because obviously they didn't do anything and they can't convince them of this. And the other guys, on the one hand, they kind of want to pin it on somebody, but on the other hand, they kind of fool themselves into believing that these are the guys. So it's you can just see this.
The public opinion is already out there.
And very again, basically it's a witch hunt for anybody who's Irish when a bomb goes off,
And they're under tremendous pressure as well.
Yeah.
Their homeland was just attacked, and they're responsible for finding out who did it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're.
And this was all set off by
this was all
set off by a jealous dude in the commune they were living in, and that they were squatting in that house. This guy ratted them out and said, "Well, these Irish guys or whatever," and got all these other 4 people in trouble because Daniel Day-Lewis was making out with his girl. Seriously.
I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the man who played Giuseppe, the father, the titler father.
He did a great job. This was a great performance.
Yeah, it's Pete Postlethwaite.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna try to pronounce it.
Yeah,
I
don't even know if I did it right, but he recently just died not too long ago, and one of his last roles was in The Town. He plays the mob guy in The Town. He's really good in that. He's a great character actor. He's done some great roles, and this is probably his shining moment in his career. He even maybe outshines Daniel Day-Lewis, which is
bold.
is really hard to do, and that just doesn't happen. And he's so good. Those two together when they're in scenes together, just so good. And you can't commend him enough for his performance. How he did not win an Oscar for this movie, I do not know.
One of them did Daniel Day-Lewis.
I think they were both nominated, and I think they both lost.
Fools.
I agree, though. The scenes where those two are together are just as tense as the interrogation scenes in a completely different way, though, because there's this just awkwardness between the two, where you can tell that they love each other, but they both, for some reason, are distant from each other. And those scenes are just so touching.
Well, I think it's an interesting relationship because they're different. They're very different people, I think. And the son doesn't want to be like his father at all. He sees his father as being a weak, meek person, and he doesn't want to be like him at all. And he's rebelling against that at the time where he gets in trouble, and then they get stuck in jail together. And over the course of it, he really has to. He doesn't want to become his father still, but he develops an understanding of this person and
a pretty deep respect.
Yeah, and loves him. Maybe more so. Comes to understand his father, and it's just a incredibly tender and just perfect performance, and it really, you can't say enough about that.
No, it's great.
I was a little shocked to see how, like, you see I can only compare these. I'm going to compare My Left Foot to American movies as well, of like this type, like in American prison movies, it's all about factions within the prison and everything, and that was so like downplayed. Like you'd see a little bit of that, but once there was an understanding drawn between people, like everything was fucking roses in there. And I just thought that was like very different than the movies that I'm used to seeing that take place in prison. Even the guards, like they weren't overly brutal, or like things that American movies would really like focus on. Just kind of nothing here, which I was totally okay with. It was different to me. I guess the 70s were just a better time. What don't we like about this movie?
I feel, I don't know that I'd have to get a better look at the rest of the movie. I guess it was difficult to get behind the characters a little bit at the beginning of the movie. It took a little while to get going, because you kind of see Daniel Day-Lewis at the beginning of this movie as just an angry youth, you know, like, you damn kids. Like, I don't know like how to describe it, but until he gets arrested, it's very difficult to empathize with his character in any way. And then as soon as that happens, you realize he's been caught up in this thing, and you can get behind it. But I haven't seen half the movie, so I feel kind of weird commenting on that.
No, I think that you pick up on something that I was going to say, Johnny, in that there's so much ground to cover here. And this movie is over 2 hours long, but there's still so much to cover, because you're covering this relationship between the father and son. That's the end of the story, but the story is really telling this true story about these young kids that got caught up in this terrorist act that they didn't commit, and they got jailed, and they were the scapegoats. And there's so many parts to cover with this that it's hard to develop the characters and develop the story and be authentic and truthful to the story. Still in that 2+ hours, it's a lot to compact in there. So there's almost not enough room to ruminate about some of the things that are going on. There's not enough time for quiet moments at certain junctures.
Yeah, I was actually going to go with. I thought maybe it could be tightened up a little bit because it is a little long, but I kind of expect that out of biopics, to be completely honest. Because yeah, they do have a lot of ground to cover. They're covering someone's life. Or at least his life up until this point. And yeah, I guess, I mean, they could have focused more. I'm having a hard time articulating what I'm thinking. I want them to cover more, but in less time.
No, I think that's fair.
So yeah, I mean, I do think this movie is really great, though, and I think overall it is it's successful to me. But yeah, it could have been tighter and more expansive, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a perfect sense. I think It's hard to write a script like this
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much to do, and to compact in there and still tell a really human story. And we basically focus on the relationship between the father and son,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's these three other young people and six other people that get caught up in this mess and go to jail as well.
But
And
fuck them.
we hardly know anything about them. But
We'll find out in the sequel.
yeah, I guess, I mean, this could have been a miniseries. I mean,
Yeah.
really.
I would have been very interested to see what happened to them. I mean, I imagine they have kind of similar stories of, strife, but who knows if they're also going through appeals and everything while this is going on. It's hard to say because that never gets mentioned.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about briefly, the music in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It had songs of the time, so it had, I believe it was 60s music.
Mm-hmm. Or the 60s and 70s. I saw some Led Zeppelin
mixed in
posters.
with some Bono, though.
Mm-hmm.
Some of his original music. Did you guys enjoy that?
Yeah, I thought the music
Did it
was
work well with the
fine.
movie?
I didn't. I thought it seemed kind of like obvious. Oh, we're trying to get the mood of the time.
Exactly. It was
And
period specific, and it was fine.
it wasn't that effective for me. It was just kind of like, oh, this is taking place in the late '60s, early '70s. What music came out then that people would know, and let's put that in there. It didn't necessarily work for me. It was okay. That was one of the drawbacks for me of the music of this. I wish it was more. There was a better score. You compare this movie to like Shawshank Redemption, and the Shawshank Redemption has such a beautiful score. I mean, they're different movies. This is more of a Jim Sheridan, who directed this movie, and all the movies that we watch this week, is he's a very stripped down filmmaker, it seems, and he doesn't have a lot of gloss on top. He's very toned down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's to his credit sometimes, but it also doesn't make his movies as compelling,
Mm-hmm.
as if they did have that score that would really carry you emotionally through the movie.
Yeah, I think it could add something, and it seemed a little bit gimmicky for me having Bono make music. They're just like, oh, it's Bono. He's Irish. And
Yeah. I would kind of, after watching these three movies, I would actually kind of describe him kind of a meat and potatoes director, like very filling in what he gives you.
The Irish Ron Howard.
Yeah, but it could use maybe a little bit more flavor, maybe a little extra gravy on top, just to go. Because there's very little gloss. It's very like everything is very sound, but there is like some things could maybe be a little tastier. So let's grade In the Name of the Father.
I will not grade this because I have not seen the whole thing.
I think it's a great watch. I think people have to watch this movie if they haven't seen it. It's very much worth it. I'm going to give it a 4.
I'm going to give it a 4.5. I thought it was really great. It definitely pushes a lot of emotional buttons. So I don't know if to tell you to watch it when you're in a good mood or if you're not in a good mood, because it might ruin it. I don't know. It's really good, and it's still very relevant today. Like, insert whatever group in here, and it still holds true. So check it out.